Oh, goody.
Alright, what is up everybody? Zombies here again. And today we are back with another Mercenaries video. This is going to be episode number 10 of Meta Monday. This is probably going to actually be going up Tuesday now, it seems. For anyone who didn't see my little update post, I've been sick the past few days. You may or may not be able to tell by the difference in my voice. Not sure if the mic picks that up or not, but yeah, I've been kind of sick, under the weather the last few days, which is why the regular flow of content has stopped. But feeling a little bit better, and hopefully we'll have all that stuff back to normal a little bit later this week. The gameplay stuff does take a bit of a bigger toll on my voice, and that has been one of the things with being sick, is I haven't had much of a voice recently. So I'm trying to give myself some full time to recover, so that might be another day or two before we get back to the gameplay stuff. But I did want to talk about the meta a bit. Now, normally, what I would do for these videos is I have a selection of decks I would go through and talk about, and then we'd get into the data. This time, in the interest of preserving my voice a little bit, to allow me to get better a little bit faster, hopefully, I'm just going to be talking about the data for this episode. Also, because I haven't played in a few days, I'm not 100% in tune with what's going on in the meta, though from what I've gathered at looking at the data and such, it doesn't seem like too much has really changed since my first kind of week playing the Trigore patch. But there's some really interesting stuff here, and for once, it is not, 10 different frost comps making up 70% of the thing. Though they are definitely still prevalent and powerful, but the Trigore buff has really turned the meta on its head. And so we've had some time, about 2 weeks now, to take a look at the impact that has had. And, well, let me tell you, it is very, very different than what we were seeing in the last Meta Monday report before we got this patch with the buffs and the Varden rework. Now, before we get into taking a look at the data, if you enjoy this type of content, do remember to like and subscribe. It does a ton to help out the channel and keeps the Mercenaries videos coming. Without further ado, let's get into the data here. So, this data is coming courtesy of the HS Replay statistics, and I took it from the top 10% of players. However, I did look at data across all of the different ranks just to get a little bit more perspective over some larger sample sizes and see if there was anything different that was kind of standing out. And generally, for most of the time, it's not super different. Sometimes there's one or two comps that that will show up in the lower ranks that you don't see at the higher ranks, but more often than not, it's actually pretty similar, at least in terms of the data they end up collecting. So I figured we would take a look at the top 10% of player data, and this is from the date of the buff patch until today, so it has been 2 weeks, which I think is a pretty reasonable time to collect data here. So, diving right into it, our first comp here is what I think might just be the best comp in the game right now. And as you can see, it's taking up a whopping 22.4% of our metagame share, almost a quarter of the meta. And that is Trigore Kazakis Diablo with a Vol'jin, Karen, and Sylvanas bench. Now, this comp is incredibly strong. If you've played Mercenaries at all PvP since the patch, there's no doubt in my mind you ran into this comp, if not played it yourself, because the synergy between these units is frankly absurd. Kazakis was already a powerful unit, but it felt like he didn't have a perfect home initially, and now with the added buffs to Trigore, he has that home. It feels like the synergy between these units is just absurd. So Kazakis giving that +4/+4 is so huge. Just giving your Diablo that extra attack to make his attack on turn 1 actually pack a bit more of a punch buffs up the Trigore even more, which is then going to buff itself again for all of the, damage triggering to get his attack in with his buffed second skill. And then Diablo just scales a crazy amount of HP off of the golems from Kazakis. And then when one of your units dies, usually it'll be Trigore that dies first, then you can just get a clean Vol'jin swap in to speed up your Trigore. You get a nice AoE, and then you'll probably have summoned at least, 2 waves of golems by then. So you can just clean up with that AoE shadow weakness and then hit them with a bunch of shadow claws for a ton of damage. And then anything that dies still grows the Diablo. And then Sylvanas is in the back for your ultimate cleanup unit. Karin is nice because he does synergize very well with Diablo, even off the bench, because you don't have to worry about your Diablo dying most of the time, so you can just guarantee that Karin switch if it's beneficial, speed up the Diablo, get some of those combos going, or slow everything down with the AoE. Another reason that Karin has probably been more popular is because Sinestra has not been as popular as she once was in the backline, so you can kind of get away with it a bit more. You don't need to be packing that Thrall or other big red answer, maybe Localar, to answer Sinestra, because Sinestra is not on every single team anymore. So yeah, I personally think this is one of, if not the best comp in the game, and if it's not the best, it is easily top 2 or top 3. It is just incredibly powerful, and I don't think anyone has really come up with a super great counter to it. I know myself and others have tried and experimented with a few different builds that focus on killing the Trigore as soon as possible, and though that sometimes can work, the rest of the comp is so resilient, it can still be challenging, and a lot of times if you go that hard on focusing Trigore and having an opener that is so blue heavy that you can just quickly kill Trigore before you can do anything, you will lose to almost any other comp that is not Trigore, and that's not a good thing for the game. That creates a very polarized meta, incentivizes the problem we already have with the matchmaking and counter queuing, and it just leads to a lot of non-games where it feels like the game is decided based on the matchup rather than the decisions you make in the game, and that's never a good thing. So yeah, that is our top comp here. Really don't think that's going to take anyone by surprise. And until we see some more changes, I think it is going to remain very high in popularity, if not increase. So moving on, our second most popular comp here is a Frost build. So Frost actually got hit pretty hard, and this can be seen in the win rate, at least in the top 10%, because despite being our number 2 comp here, this comp actually is rocking a lower than 50% win rate, which is frankly very surprising, as typically when I do these, especially in the top 10%, almost every comp has at least 50% win rate, if not high 50s, low to mid 60s. That's just a trend I've seen throughout the past in doing these meta reports, and usually there's only one comp that is that low win rate or lower win rate, if at all, and it is never usually one of the most popular ones. So this was really surprising to see, but I think I understand the reason behind it. So this comp is Varden, Jaina, Localar with Diablo, Sinestra, Karin bench, coming in at 1,300 games and 13.2% of the metagame share here. So yeah, this one, Frost got hit pretty hard with that Varden nerf, and I think the reason we are seeing a win rate as low as it is because of the variance of Varden and then Localar on top of that. Because due to the prevalence of Trigore in the meta, as we'll see as we go through the rest of these comps here, it's just very difficult to use Varden effectively when you don't know where their hits are going to go. 2 or 3 of those hits could go on Trigore, and suddenly you might be in a great position to snowball that game pretty hard and just take them out from there. Or the opposite could happen. None of your hits could go Trigore, or maybe only one on Trigore, two on the others, and all of a sudden your Varden is terribly maimed, and then Localar gets punished for trying to do its Hailstorm, because the odds are not in your favor either way if you're doing a non-targeted attack, because you're more likely to hit one of the other two than the Trigore, and then you trigger the Trigore and you take 1,000,000 damage, and it's just really bad, and I think it's hurt Frost pretty significantly. Now, does that mean Frost is dead? No, of course not. Frost is still a very powerful core, and as we will see as we go through this, there are still multiple builds that are focused around Frost that do still have a lot of success. However, the second most popular build we're seeing at these higher ranks, according to the data, seems to not be doing as great, and I think the reason for that is because of the inconsistency of Varden, and to a lesser extent Localar, but more so Varden, because that was the character that was actually changed, and you don't really have to press, skill 1 with Localar. You can always go for skill 2, whereas Varden, you don't really have a choice. You're pressing skill 1, turn 1 every time, because if you don't, you're not doing anything, and that's not what you want to be doing in Mercenaries. So that is comp number 2. That one actually really surprised me, just seeing the win rate, especially over such a large sample of games. 1,300 is nothing to scoff at in 2 weeks, and these are the only 2 comps that actually have over 1,000 games in the top 10%. So that was kind of surprising. Next one up here, another Trigore comp. This is one that I think will also not surprise anybody. Trigore, Kazakus, Valera, Vol'jin, Sylvanas, Thrall, with 870 games and just under 9% of the metagame share here. Basically, how these Trigore comps have been working is you throw in Kazakus, you throw in Trigore, and then you kind of pick your poison as what you want your third unit to be. The most popular and most effective picks, in my opinion, have been Diablo, Valera, and probably to a lesser extent Galvangar, for the extra attack bonus he can provide. But particularly Valera and Diablo seem to be the ones that have really stood out. And I don't think this is going to be surprising to anybody. It feels like with this change, maybe they were thinking Trigore would do some more to combat Valera, but instead he just provides to be a fantastic combo enabler and synergistic piece for Valera. And especially in Trigore mirrors, getting down to 0 speed is awesome because you can actually get ahead of opponents' Trigore at 1 speed, right? So the Valera problem is far from solved, but the metagame does seem to revolve a bit more around Trigore than her right now, which I think is really a testament to how busted Trigore is right now. The fact that any character could kind of dethrone Valera as the kind of #1 merc that just goes in like 1,000,000 different comps under the sun and is successful is rather surprising. We haven't really seen anything like that since Localar, which was a very clearly printed counter for Valera. So the fact that we're seeing this in a character who was basically bottom of the barrel before this buff is rather surprising. In terms of the bench, Vol'jin, just like I said before, synergy with Kazakus is fantastic. Sylvanas, again, great synergy there as well. And Thrall, Thrall is just kind of your good generic red, right? Like, if you're expecting especially a Sinestra, but even Sylvanas to a lesser extent, Thrall just gives you a good way of deleting a green off the bench. And I think right now he's probably still one of, if not the most effective units that does that without needing any kind of synergy. And you also get the added benefit of, if your Valera is still kicking, you can speed him up a bunch, which can be very powerful. So that's our third comp there. The next one is another Frost comp. So this one is Jaina, Varden, Localar, so much like our second most popular comp, but the bench is a little bit different, and I do want to make a note of the equipment on this one. So it's Diablo and Karen with their regular stuff, but Tyrion on the bench, and Tyrion's actually running a very atypical equipment. And that equipment is Tyrion's Shield. For anyone who doesn't know, that gives him an additional plus 10 health. And this Merc starts the game with Divine Shield. So this surprised me because I have not seen this literally at all. I don't know if this has gotten a little bit more popular in the last few days or week or so when I haven't been playing as much. But I think the intention with this is as a Sylvanas counter, because Tyrion has the ability to shrink the opposing Sylvanas, and so that way you can set up a kill without having its death rattle go off and hit you for 60 or 70 damage or whatever it is from all the Kazakus golems. Pretty cool counter, neat idea. This build seems like it would really have a problem with Sinestra though. However, like we said, Sinestra is not the most prominent green bench unit as it once was. I mean, I think honestly that position might just go to Sylvanas now. I mean, sometimes you do get both of them, but I think Sylvanas has generally taken over in terms of popularity, as we'll see, because of the amount of Trigore comps that are listed here. But this one is coming in at 830 games and 8.5% of the metagame share. Next up, another Kazakus Trigore build. This one with Valera, Vol'jin, Cookie, Sylvanas. So yeah, this one isn't very different than our number 3 comp. Only difference here, instead of Thrall, they opted to go for Cookie for more health. Probably decent in the mirror, as sometimes the health can be nice, but I do think, personally, I prefer having a better red on the bench, be it Karen or Thrall, as I think there are a lot of powerful green units out there right now, and having a good answer to them is very important. But yeah, that one's coming in at 830 games, 8.5% of the metagame, much like the comp before it. Next up, we have a this is almost like a new age version of the old Valera Frost, right? Now that Varden's been knocked down a peg, we have Belinda Trigore Valera with Jaina Varden Localar. I haven't played this one yet, but it looks pretty interesting, and I'll probably try it out because, I mean, we all know how busted it is. Just speeding up the Belinda Elemental, getting that quick freeze, it's pretty busted. This build obviously doesn't have the ability to lock your opponent out on turn 2 with the Cold Snap. However, you can just deal so much damage with Trigore, that's not really as much of a concern, right? Like, who cares if you're not locking them out if you're just killing them? So the only downside I see with this is you are running 2 greens in the open, which is a little bit sketchy in this meta because Trigore, right? Trigore eats greens alive, and part of the reason Diablo is so good is because he scales up so much HP, he's harder to kill, whereas Belinda and Valera do not have that benefit. Once they take that damage, they've taken it, and they do die much faster in this meta, it seems, than they used to. And then Frost on the bench here, I mean, I think Frost bench is still really good. I think between Trigore comps and Frost comps, why not just throw them together, right? Like, those are some of the best units in the game, so there's no reason to not play them together, right? It just makes sense. So this one's coming in at 680 games and just under 7% of the metagame here. Next one is a personal favorite of mine, and this is actually one of the comps that was really severely hurt by the metagame change. Definitely sad to see it, but this is Nature Dragons. So Yulon, Longjin, and Sinestra with the Nature bench of Malf, Brukan, and Cookie. I really love this comp. I still do really love this comp. It was the first dragon build before we got a lot of other dragons and stuff, and even after we did get them, it still proved to be pretty powerful. However, the new meta is very hostile towards it. And we can see that because this is one of the other few comps that has an absolutely abysmal win rate right now. I think this is actually the lowest out of all the comps here. 40% win rate. That's pretty bad. When you're comparing most of the the other win rates in this list, and most of them are around 55 to 60+%. Having something all the way down at 40 is really a pretty telling sign that it's just not working out right now with this deck at higher ranks. It's unfortunate to see. I still think these are all still strong units, but another interesting thing, this is the only comp with a nature bench, which is pretty crazy because, a few patches ago, nature was all over the place. And much like Karen Diablo Cookie originally, nature's kind of fallen off. It hasn't gotten any worse, but it just doesn't line up against what the current meta is right now, it seems. But this one comes in at 480 games, just under 5% of the metagame here. And more Trigore, right? There's a lot of Trigore here. We talked last time about how Frost was overwhelmingly the most popular comp, and now it's like, well, we have more variety, but the variety really is just Frost and Trigore, or Trigore with Frost. And that's a little bit concerning to me, especially because that they're changing how the release cycle for Mercenaries works. I won't go on a whole thing about it right now, but if we're not going to be getting Mercs drops as regularly, I really do hope we can get some balance changes soon, because they have very clearly overtuned Trigore. I think this buff is even crazier than the Grom buff, and I think in the best interest of the long-term health of the game, it wouldn't be a bad idea to tone him back down a bit. Not into unplayability, but just make him a little bit more reasonable. But I'll probably have a separate video talking about my thoughts on the Trigore change later on. But yeah, for this comp, Kazakus, Trigore, Valera, Sinestra, Cookie, Sylvanas. Just throwing in Sinestra here. Instead of, no Vol'jin in this one, I guess. Personally, I think that's a mistake. I think you should always be running Vol'jin in Kazakus builds. Vol'jin is just simply too good with Kazakus, especially against opposing Trigores sometimes, but this build decided to omit him. I'd probably replace Cookie for Vol'jin, because I don't think the extra health is really worth that much compared to what Vol'jin enables, but that's just me. But this one's coming in at 380 games and just under 4% of the metagame share. Next up, we do have another Belinda, Trigore, Valera build. Jaina, Varden, local R bench. So again, just going all in on the Frost here, right? Like, this is actually the exact same build as a previous one. I think the only difference is the build with more games was actually running Band of Frost on the Varden, and this one I believe is running the Death Rattle. Yeah, it is. So literally the same comp, only difference is this one has Death Rattle. That was also changed from Varden, so now it's dealing more damage, but the freeze isn't as impactful. I don't know if I really like Band of Frost off the bench, because a lot of the times you were like comboing that with your Belinda and speeding up with Valera, and I guess you could still do that open if you don't want to open Trigore, but that seems very awkward. So I'm not really sure how I feel about that choice in the build, but Varden's still kind of up in the air post changes as to what the 100% best choices are for them, so it makes sense for people to be experimenting with that a little bit. This one comes in at 320 games and 3.3% on the metagame share. Then we have another Frost comp. I think this was the Frost comp with the highest win rate out of all the Frost comps I've seen. So this one, Belinda, Jaina, Varden, local R, Sinestra, Cookie. So you just have your very solid 4-unit Frost core, Cookie for the HP, Sinestra as your solo green. Great comp, still really powerful, but I don't think you have the easiest time with Trigore. Again, I've been out of the the game for a few days due to being sick, so maybe that's changed a little bit, but looking at the representation, I don't think that's necessarily the case, because I think if any of these comps was super favored against Trigore, especially the more popular builds of it, they would have risen up to much higher popularity than they currently are, or would have an even crazier win rate because of how much of the meta is Trigore right now. And that hasn't really happened from the data I've taken a look at. But this one is coming in at 320 games, 3.3% of the metagame as well. And another Frost comp, local Arjana Varden, Diablo Karen Cookie, the classic CDC bench. This has seen a little bit of rise in popularity due to, like I said before, Sinestra not being as common as she once was, so you can kind of get away with it a bit. And again, the Frost core is still very strong, even with the nerfed Varden. But again, especially against Trigore comps, you are relying a lot on RNG. And though sometimes, you can tilt that RNG in your favor with flips and stuff, that's just not the case with the Varden change. And I think as long as Trigore remains a very prominent part of the meta, the Varden games are going to feel very RNG dependent, because you can just mess them up really hard if you kill it off quickly and early, or they can just destroy you if you don't hit their Trigore at all. So I don't really like that. I think it, like I said before, it leads to rather unengaging gameplay. And personally, I don't think the CDC backline is like great. It's okay in some matchups, but specifically against like the backlines in the more popular comps, and especially literally anybody that happens to bring in a Sinestra, you're just done. So I don't think it's particularly a great one, but that one's coming in at 300 games, 3.1% of the metagame. And we have Trigore, Kazakis, Diablo, Vol'jin, Sinestra, Solanas. This one's just thrown in Sinestra instead of Karen. Makes sense. Sinestra's still really good. I like Sinestra. Also has that little bit of shadow synergy with Vol'jin too, which is sometimes helpful, but usually doesn't come up a lot. But yeah, the name of the game here is jam 6 of like the 10 or 12 best units into a comp, right? Like you've got the Frost units, you've got Trigore, Kazakis, you've got Valera, Belinda, Diablo, and those are most of them, right? Like there's only so, like, even though we have a ton of comps here, most of them are the same units. There really isn't a lot of variety right now, which is a bummer to see, because that's kind of one of the things I was hoping we would see more of with a patch like this. Is I was hoping we'd see a little bit more variety due to all these buffs. But unfortunately, we really aren't seeing that, because Trigore is just so powerful. But yeah, that one is coming in also at 300 games, 3.1% of the metagame. And we have our only Galvangar comp. I played a lot of this on release and really liked it, but I do think the Diablo and Valera builds probably do end up outshining it, sadly. This one is Kazakis, Trigore, Galvangar, Vol'jin, Sylvanas, Thrall. Again, really solid core units, just not much to say other than it does the good stuff. And yeah, that's the Galvangar extra attack, pretty good on Trigore, pretty good on Kazakis. The only thing, and he did get a buff, so I was happy to see that. Gave him a bit more survivability, which was really nice. And I really like him in the comp, but I don't think he's really doing anything incredibly more powerful than Diablo or Valera are. That one is coming in at 300 games as well, 3.1% of the meta. And we're getting to our last few comps here. This one is probably one of the most interesting, and probably the one I'm going to play next when I get back on ladder. This one I think, our only build with Nefarian, which is pretty crazy because Nefarian was kind of all over the place for a little while. And now, like, none of those dragon builds even seem to exist anymore, which is really sad, in my opinion. We got a lot of cool units in the dragons, and it seems like all of those strategies have just been completely invalidated by the Trigore meta, which is really unfortunate. But this one is Nefarian, Trigore, Yulon, Longjin, Tyrandra, Millhouse. So this one's using a bunch of buffed units. Tyrandra and Millhouse both got some pretty significant buffs, especially Tyrandra. And they can be a very powerful force in the back line. And then Longjin buffing up that arcane to make them even more insane. Tyrandra doubling up arcane stuff. And it's pretty good. I like the idea of what this is going for a lot. And I experimented quite a bit with a arcane bench shortly after the patch went live, and I really enjoyed it. It felt pretty strong. So I was actually surprised to see it really only show up in the one comp. But I think this is probably one of the coolest comps on the list. Only coming in at 280 games, though, and just under 3% of the meta. And that brings us to our last two here. This one is really weird, and this one is another build where I don't think it's particularly good, and its win rate kind of reflects that, as it is just above 40%, so not looking too great. But this is like a Trigore humans comp. I guess the idea is trying to counter Trigore somehow with this. I don't really see it, though. But yeah, the comp is Varian, Trigore, Tyrion, Leroy, Anduin, Cariel. I don't really have much insight into this comp, as I haven't played it. I haven't played against it. I haven't even seen anybody talk about this. This was the one that really threw me for a loop. And the only synergy we have here is they're a bunch of humans, so they could be trying to use Varian's speed up a little bit. They are running the war banner, so additional retaliation stuff. So it's like, I guess they're trying to punish units for attacking, punish the opposing Diablo and stuff, but I'm not really buying it. I don't think this really does enough of what you want it to do in these kinds of matchups. Like, the Leroy also has ninja looting, so that passive +6 attack whenever an enemy dies. And then Cariel, I haven't seen Cariel in like anything but like a weird Vandar taunt build a little while ago, so I can't say I understand what synergy is going on here, other than like maybe like healing with Anduin. But Anduin isn't good against pretty much any of the backlines running around. Like, all the backlines have a Sinestra or a Sylvanas, or like they're just way too good against Anduin. Anduin isn't what he was at launch, where he just scales out of control. It's just there are powerful greens that will shut him down, and he can't really do anything against them on his own. So I was really surprised to see this one. It is coming in at just under, I think it's like 2.5% of the metagame. And then that brings us to our last comp here. This is another Trigore comp, unsurprisingly. This one is Trigore, Kazakis, Diablo, Vol'jin, Cookie, Sylvanas. I think this is similar to... Yeah, this is similar to another comp. I'm trying to see what the difference is, because I'm really not seeing one. Oh, I guess this wasn't. I'm confusing it with another one. That's that's just how much these Trigore comps seem to blend together. I think there was another build with this exact same backbench, but it had Valera instead of Diablo. But again, it's just how much they blend together. But yeah, it's probably good. You know, you have one of the best openers in the game with some of the best bench units. What else is there to say about it? That one's coming in at 200 games, and I believe 2% of the meta. So yeah, that is our Meta Monday report for the first 2 weeks of the Trigore meta. I'm hopeful that we will get some changes soon, because personally, I do not think this metagame is sustainable for for the long term. I don't think the new unit we got, Murky, really has any kind of potential in a meta like this. Even if we got good Murlocs, we would need some insane Murlocs to even see him have a fighting chance in this meta, for being honest. Which is a shame because he's a really cool unit, and I hope he can see play. But I think if they're going to be doing more balance updates like they said they were, they need to be aware that, you know, buffing can sometimes go a little bit too far, and it's okay to turn it back down a bit. And, you know, you don't have to nuke the character from orbit, but making them have a little bit more agency and ways of being played around and counters and stuff makes for a healthier experience for the game. So I'm hopeful we will see some changes in that direction, and maybe some more buffs for other underused or underpowered characters. Because even though Trigore sticks out like a sore thumb as the buff that really went over the top, I think the majority of the other buffs were very well received by the player base. I mean, you could even argue that some of the buffs didn't go far enough for some characters, and I definitely would. But other ones did a fantastic job, particularly looking at Tyrande. I think her buff was a great example of how you can turn an essentially useless character into a character that has a purpose and a place in the game. So I'd like to see more buffs in like that level rather than Trigore level. I do empathize with changes, though, like this not being the easiest thing to do, because obviously they don't have very much data on Trigore, because Trigore wasn't being played. So, you know, they might not have foreseen just how crazy he would be. I think at the very least, you need to make it so Trigore stops triggering when he dies and other things get hit at the same time. I think that's really stupid. And it's very similar to the Vol'jin chain lightning thing, which they changed a while ago, where it could bounce off a dead unit. Yeah, if nothing else, change that. It's stupid. It shouldn't work that way. And it's just giving a ridiculous character even more ridiculous damage. We'll have to wait and see if we get any changes, though. There are some kind of soft confirmations. A balance change for some of the other formats is coming soon. We don't know if that's this week. We don't know if that's next week. We haven't been given any concrete details, but the wild meta has been absolutely torn apart by some of the stuff between the new cards and some of the unnerfed stuff. And we've gotten some confirmation they're going to act on that. So a balance patch is coming. So we're going to have to wait and see if we get anything for Mercs in that patch. I really do hope we can see some more balance stuff, because they did mention that we will still be getting balance updates in regular patches, even though the big drops will be reserved for 0.4 patches. So I'm giving, you know, it time to see what happens. But I think if you're going to be spreading out the time between launches and releasing all these characters, you do have to do a bit more to maintain a healthy metagame, as players are not going to play this for another month and a half, 2 months, however long it is, until we get the big Mercs drop. And even if you drop a powerful and impactful character, like, let's say, Sir Finley as our red event Murloc or something to hold us over, I don't think that could realistically fix what is going on with Trigore and the current metagame. And it's kind of funny, you know, in the last one we talked about Frost was dominating everything and we wanted changes. And I guess careful what you wish for, because now, in my opinion at least, this is kind of worse than the Frost meta, as the Frost meta is problematic in its own regard, but at least you kind of had some ways to counter stuff. It could get a little rock, paper, scissors at time, but I'm of the opinion I would honestly take that metagame over this one. And I really only played a week and a half, because like I said, I haven't even played the last few days because I've been sick. But I liked it at first. It got old really quick, and everyone I've talked to, it just doesn't seem like there are very viable counters to these Trigore decks, which is a real problem. And I think it's going to be a very unhealthy metagame unless it gets adjusted in some way. So we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully not too long on that front. But I am curious what you think about the current meta, what you've been seeing. Does this seem kind of accurate to your experience on ladder? Have you been seeing different stuff? What do you think about the Trigore changes and how he's kind of dominated the metagame pretty severely? I mean, this reminds me, it's very similar to kind of GVT in its early days before people found things that could work against it, or before we got more units that could help out against it, like Localar. But at least even with that, I think there are more viable counters to GVT at its peak than there are for these Trigore builds, which is unfortunate. But we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully we'll get some more adjustments soon. I think that is the course of action they really should take if they are going to be changing up the release cycles like this, because I don't think this is going to be a meta that's enjoyable for the long term for the majority of players in its current form. But that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, do remember to like and subscribe, and regular videos will be resuming soon. It might be another day or two before I can do more gameplay stuff, as, like I said, that takes quite a bit more out of my voice, as those recording sessions are much longer. And I am still getting over being sick, so I don't want to push myself too hard before I'm fully better. But you can probably expect those to resume maybe a little bit later on this week, in another day or two or so, depending on how I'm feeling. But I'll keep you posted. That is going to do it for this video, though. So thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.